Hello, this is Jeff Scott, your instructor for the online version of 152-157 Website Development XHTML CSS for the fall 2015 semester at Blackhawk Technical College. What I'd like to do right now is to go over the PowerPoints for Chapter 14 of our text. This is the last chapter, so this is the last set of lectures, of course, then that I'll be doing. Chapter 14 discusses JavaScript and also one of the JavaScript libraries, which is called JQuery. You can see then here we're going to talk about JavaScript and its purposes, how it interacts with something that's called the DOM, which is the Document Object Model. We'll do some work actually with JavaScript, and then we'll go into talking about JQuery, talking about the uses of JQuery, where you can obtain it from, how to use it, the jQuery selectors and methods, and a few other things. So let's get going. So JavaScript is an object-based scripting language. What that means is JavaScript has built-in object-oriented programming features, or OOP features, which you can choose to use, but you don't have to. With a true object-oriented programming language, you have to create classes and methods and attributes, etc. With JavaScript, you can do that, but you don't have to do that. As mentioned on the slide here, JavaScript works with objects associated with a web page document. Window objects, document objects, element objects, etc. And you'll see some of these. Alright, quick little brief history. JavaScript was originally developed by Netscape and it was called LiveScript. For some reason, that was right around the time when the actual Java programming language was coming out, and people from Netscape talked with people from Sun Microsystems, who at the time owned Java, and asked if they could change the name of LiveScript to JavaScript. They were given permission, so they did. That said, as mentioned in the last bullet here, JavaScript is definitely not Java. You use JavaScript for a multitude of reasons, and some of them are listed here. Displaying a message box, selecting list navigation, working with form validation, creating new windows, doing image rollovers, sending status messages, displaying the current date, and doing calculations. There's two different ways that you can actually create programs in JavaScript. Alright, you can put them, if you want to put them within a web page, you can put them literally right within script tags within the page, or you can place them in external files, which is the recommended way to go. The script element, it looks like this. So let's build. I know this is, we're going over the information for the PowerPoints, but we'll just build a quick little down and dirty. And we'll call this internal JavaScript example. I'll throw an H1 tag in here that just says internal JavaScript example. Alright, and then as we go on, I'll put in about 2 or 3 line breaks. Okay, now all I want to do here is I want to ask a person their name, and once they tell me their name, I'm going to say hello followed by their name. So I'm going to put this into script tags. And then I'm going to end my body tag and end my HTML tag. Alright, I'm just going to save this to the desktop here, and I'm going to call this internal JavaScript .html. Fairly certain I don't have a file by that name. Now if I ran this right now, all I'm going to see is the H1 tag, so it's going to say internal JavaScript. That should be the only thing that I see right now. There it is. All right. But if I come in here now into my script tags, and I'm going to say here, var name equals prompt, which is a built-in JavaScript function. Please enter your name. I'll give it a default value that says enter name here. All right. And after I give that, so that's going to give me a prompting input box. Then I'm going to say alert, which is an output box. And I'll say the name entered was followed by name. All right, pretty simple stuff. So let's run this. All right, please enter your name. Jeff Scott. The name entered was Jeff Scott. Again, that should be pretty obvious what we just did right there. At least, hopefully it is. If we look at the page source, again, H1 tag, couple of line break tags, and notice that since it's internal, it had to go between beginning and ending script tags. I created a local variable named name, all right, and set that equal to the results of this prompt box. Then I echoed it out. And you'll notice the plus sign is used here, and that plus sign is used for concatenation. So I'm going to grab just these 2 lines of code that I have, copy, and I'm going to create a brand new file. I'm going to type in there function main. You can call the function anything you want, but I just happen to be calling it main. All right, so there's my code that I just put in, but it's going to be in a separate file, and I'm going to call that file external JavaScript.js. Oops, .js. So there's that file. Now I'm going to take my internal file, and I'm going to do a save as on that, and I'm going to save that as external JavaScript.html. All right, so then I'm going to come in here, and instead of having these script tags and all that good stuff, I'm going to get rid of all of it. All right, I don't really need these line break tags. I didn't need them in the other one either. So I'm going to come in here, and under my title, I'm going to put script source equals the file I just created, which was external JavaScript.js, and then I'm going to end my script tag. Okay? All right, let's run this. Oh, it doesn't like something. Let's see where I save that. External JavaScript.js. Source equals external JavaScript.js. Oh, I know what the problem is. All right. Yeah, it's there, but I didn't call the function. I have to find a way to call it. All right. So I'm going to come in here. I'm going to add a button. Input type equals button. On click equals main. And we'll say value equals run program. So let's run this again. There's our button to run the program. Run it. Please enter your name, Jeff Scott, and the name entered was Jeff Scott. So the difference between these two examples is in the first one, close all this stuff. I don't need any of it anymore. But in the first example, what I ended up doing, that was the internal JavaScript. Not quite sure where I saved that one, so we'll find it. I'm not worried about it. Let's look at the second one first then. We put a script tag in here that said link to an external JavaScript file that's called external JavaScript.js, which was this. And then what we said was when you click the button that's called Run Program, when you click it, run the main function. So it did exactly what we asked it to do. All right. So trying to find out where I put that internal file. External. I guess that's it. Internal javascript.html. So in the first example, we put the code inline and we put it in there right between script tags. And in the second example, we said script, but we said source equals because we used an external file. Again, this one should run the exact same way. There it is. All right, let's continue on. So that was an example of both JavaScript with a script element, and I guess that's all they showed up till this point. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the DOM, which is short for Document Object Model. One thing that's, in my opinion, is important you start doing when you're working with JavaScript, and a lot of it, when you're working with it, you'll be working with forms, is to have both a name tag and an ID tag. Because one of the keys to being able to use the DOM, the Document Object Model, is to have an ID for virtually everything that you work with. And there's a special routine that you use that's called get element by ID. And it has kind of a weird looking spelling syntax. Get the word element, so the first letter in each new word starts with a capital. That's called camel casing, and that's ID with a little d. If you put it in with an uppercase D, it does not work. All right, so they're talking about the DOM here, and as it says, a portion of the DOM is shown at the left, on the left. The DOM, or Document Object Model, defines every object and every element on a web page in a hierarchical type of structure. If you start to learn how to process the DOM or do what's called walk the DOM, there's virtually nothing on a web page you can't do. All right. The author goes into a little bit more depth and breadth of coverage than I wish she would have in this chapter, but she starts to talk about objects. And as it says, an object is a thing or an entity. The browser window is an object. A submit button is an object. The web page itself is an object. If you put text boxes on a page, each text box is an object. A label is an object, etc. So virtually anything that you put on there is going to be an object. A property is a characteristic or an attribute of an object. If that confuses you, think about it this way, that if I was going to be talking about a person object, their attributes might be their height, their weight, their gender, their eye color, their hair color, etc. So some of the examples that they give here, the background color of a web page document, the date a web page file was last modified, the source file of an image object. All right, and there are plenty of other ones. A method is a behavior, or it's some kind of an action that an object can perform, such as writing text to a web document. You've seen the document.write, such as submitting the form, the name of the form .submit. JavaScript is also what's known as an event handling language. You can kind of look at it this way. You go to run your JavaScript program, and JavaScript is sitting there waiting for you to do something. When you do that something, whatever the something is, JavaScript reacts to it. Things like a click event. I already showed you one of those with onClick. Placing the mouse over an element or removing the mouse from an element, which is on mouse over and on mouse out. Loading a page into memory or unloading a page into memory. You'll notice that all these start with on. And there's some more here. JavaScript, as it says, can be configured to perform actions when events occur. All right. So it says here, so here's a hyperlink. And when you mouse over the hyperlink, an alert should come up that says click, go to home. So let's grab that one. Let's grab that example that they show here. I'm I'm grabbing the author's own example here, and I'm going to come in and create a new file. For right now, I'm just going to paste that in. But I'm going to grab the stuff I had from the other file here, and I'll just grab the internal one. And I'll paste it in. Don't need those blanks there. All right, and then I'll grab the rest of the code from there, which is this. It's a little nicer, then I have to worry about keying all that stuff in myself and possibly making a mistake. All right, so I'm going to save this, and I'm going to save this as event javascript.html. Okay, and I'm going to run this. Well, that's interesting. It didn't quite work out the way I wanted. Oh, I didn't put my end script tag in there. I don't know what I did, to be honest with you. So let me get rid of this. Move that over to here. All right, script a href on mouse over equals all this good stuff. Home. Let's put in our ending script tag. Let's put in our ending body tag. And let's put in our ending HTML tag. All right, now could there be a mistake in here? Certainly. Hopefully there's not, but we'll check. Still is something in here that it doesn't like. And I'll tell you what it is. That's not JavaScript. All right, so I don't need those script tags. That's just straight code. But what we're saying is, okay, give me a hyperlink. Let me put a couple blank lines between this. All right, so give me an H1 tag that says JavaScript event example. Then give me a hyperlink. And when I mouse over the hyperlink that says home on it, if I take my mouse and put it over it, it should give me an alert up that says click to go home. So let's see if that indeed works. There it is. Put my mouse over it. There's the alert. And I can keep doing that. All right. Again, most of the examples that are shown in here are fairly simplistic examples. JavaScript debugging. The author says here when you're debugging a JavaScript program, remember that JavaScript, when it comes to its variable names, JavaScript is case sensitive. So pay close attention to the upper lower cases of letters. Be careful how you use spaces and quotation marks. All right, verify you've saved the page before you run it. Verify you're testing the most recent version of the page. So even if you saved it, if you've got it up in your browser, you may have to refresh the browser. If you get an error message, look at the console. We'll look at that in just a bit. In fact, I'll show you that. So if I come through here and I bring up a web page, doesn't matter really what page I bring up, so I can bring up Blackhawk's page. All right, I'm in Firefox right now, and if I hit F12, what it does is it breaks my screen into two, and what it's showing down here are all of, basically it's all of the components that make this right here. And if I don't want to do it there, I can also do it in here inside of Google Chrome. So I can again go into blackhawk.edu, Blackhawk, and I can again hit the F12 key. And the same kind of thing happens. All right. May not be loaded on this machine. I don't know if it's totally loaded or not, so looks like it is though. All right, there it is. Okay. All right. we'll have a little bit more to say about the error console in a bit. So, a variable is a place in memory, and really, I typically define it as it's a memory location whose value can vary or change as the program's running. So I can sit there and type in this var username equal Karen, like it says on the screen, document.write username, and that's going to write Karen. In the next line after this, if I say username equals Bill, and I do another document.write of username, then it will equal Bill. So a variable, as it says there, it's a placeholder for information stored in the computer's memory. The prompt I've already shown you. It displays a message and accepts a value from the user. So if I say this, whatever I put in there, whatever value I put in, it's going to be stored into here. The arithmetic operators are the ones you would think you would work with. Addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. Equals means assign. So technically this statement does not mean quantity equals 10. It means take the value 10 and assign it to the variable quantity. There's also one more in here, just so you know. And that is, oops, I don't know how I can move that over, if I can move that over, but let's see. If I put in a percent sign, that means modulo. Oops, modulo. And it's set up kind of weird, but I just want it, here, let me do this. See if I can grab all this. I don't know how it'll copy, especially if I throw it into something like Notepad, but we'll try it anyway. Doesn't copy at all. Well, let's put it this way. You've got the plus sign for addition, the minus sign for subtraction, the asterisk for multiplication, the / for division, the percent sign for what's called modulus, and it's the remainder operation. I don't think I need to give you addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division examples, but if I say this, z equals 9 modulo 6, what that means is take 9 and divide it by 6, which it goes in there once, and the remainder is 3. So the answer, z, is assigned 3. All right, and then finally the other one that they mentioned earlier, the equal sign, which means assignment. All right, let's continue on. Here's some comparison operators. Double equals for equality. So in other words, I want to make sure you see this, especially if you're not in the JavaScript class. If I come in here and do this, if I come in and say var A equals 27, var B equals 16, and then I say var C equals 0. All right, then I've got some other code maybe, and then later on in my program I want to say if A equals 27, then what I want to do is I want to set C equal to 12. And if it's not, so otherwise, which means else, I want to set C equals to negative 12, or I want to assign that value there. Now, this says, do a comparison. Compare the literal 27. So compare that with the value that's stored in A. Well, it is 27, so that's going to be true, so C is going to be equal to 12. If I do this, that basically is just saying, can I take 27 and assign it to A? And of course you can. But, so in that case, it still is going to be 12, but guess what? Anything that I put in there will now be equal, set C equal to 12. This else will never hit. So if you're checking for equality, always use a double equal sign, not a single equal sign. I've already shown you the if and the else, so I'm not going to go over that. A function is a block of code. All right. One or more Java statements, I've already shown you that. You define a function like this, and once you've defined the function, you have to call it. And I already proved that to you. I put that button in there that on the on-click, I called main. All right. Form validation. There's an example in your book, and what I'll do is I'll copy the whole thing and put it out there when we go through the actual in-class example. But as it says, it's common to use JavaScript to validate form information. It's actually not as common as it used to be because HTML5 has some built-in form validation checkers. We'll talk about how to do it in JavaScript and how to do it with HTML5 a little bit later on. All right. So when you validate things, it's all going to look like this. So don't worry about it right now. We'll look at it in more depth and breadth of coverage. All right, don't expect JavaScript to always function for every visitor. It's possible for a user to come in and disable JavaScript. In other words, turn it off. And as it says, some users might not be able to even do things like mouse clicks if they're sight impaired or if they have some kind of a disability. So you want to make sure to always provide a way for your site to be used even if JavaScript isn't functioning. It might be a little bit more literal type of way, not as intuitive, and it might look uglier, but you should always provide it. All right, jQuery is an example of a JavaScript library. Just like you've got a library in your hometown where you can check out books and read them, well here, what a JavaScript library is it's a collection of code that you can use by just adding it to your web page. And as it says, it does a lot of different stuff for you, like provide interaction, dynamic effects. Here's a couple of the sites that you can go to for more information. So some of the common uses of jQuery are shown right here. Dynamically manipulating CSS properties of elements, detecting and reacting to events, animating events on a web page, and there's a lot more stuff that you can do to it also. All right. Here is a way of adding jQuery to a web page. Notice I said a way because the first way is to go right out to the jQuery website, which is jQuery.com, hit the download button. You can download either what's called a minified version or a non-minified version, sometimes called compressed or uncompressed. The minified or compressed version has as much white space taken out of it as possible. So the file size is smaller, so it will load faster if it is on your web page. The unminified version will load slower because it's bigger and it has comments and stuff. Let's go out and take a look at those. I'm going to show you both of them. So this is the jQuery download page. You'll notice that they have some here that start with 1.11, and they have some that start with 2. The difference between these is the ones that start with 1.11 still provide support for Internet Explorer 6, 7, and 8, where the ones that start with 2 do not. So typically, you want your user to at least have IE9. So notice here where it says download the compressed version. I'm going to open it and show it to you. In fact, let's do it this way. I'll do both of them. Here's the uncompressed version. So they're both there. All right, so I'm going to show my downloads, and there they both are. Okay, so I want to open my download folder, and I want to grab both of these. Okay, so I'm going to copy them, and I'm just going to make a temporary little folder here on my home page that's filled with garbage right now, but I'm going to put it over here, and I'm just going to call this folder Chapter 14, and I'm going to drop both those in there. If I look at the one that's minified, it looks pretty ugly, and you might say, well, that's not a very big file. Yes, it is. That's what that file is. Now the next one is the same file, but it's uncompressed. So in other words, look at how much easier it is to read. And as you can see when you look through it, it is over 9,000 lines of code, over 9,200 lines of code. All right? But it's the same file, whether it's compressed or not compressed. You end up doing virtually everything that you do, or most everything you do in jQuery, inside of what's called the document ready event. As it says, that event is triggered when the browser has loaded the DOM for the web page. You can do things like display alerts. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff. That's a really cheesy example. jQuery works with selectors. As it says, a selector indicates which DOM elements jQuery will affect. And if I go to this page here, this selector page, which is under jQuery.com category, this has got all your selectors are in there, and they're in alphabetic order. So if you have a desire, you can take a look through there. So here's some of the more well-known, well-used jQuery methods. My goal here is not to teach you jQuery. My goal here is not to read to you, but to have you take a look at some of the stuff that's there. If you decide you want to go there and you want to learn a little bit about this, one of the best places to go to, there's two of them I'm going to show you quickly. And the first one is, you've already seen it, but if I go to jQuery.com, all right, there'll be a link up near the top that says API documentation. Okay? And that's got literally right there as I'm going through this. I don't know how many there are here, but there's quite a few. Those are all the different built-in jQuery methods that you can use. All right? You can also go out to jQuery UI for user interface, jQueryui.com. And you can get examples of all sorts of stuff. For instance, I like the accordion example. All right? So notice what this does is I click each one of these. See what happens? And what's nice about this is I can go over to view source. I can go and highlight all of that code that's under the view source. Make sure you do not get the line numbers. All right, I'm going to copy it there. I'm going to just start up a new file here, paste it in, okay, and just save this into chapter 14. We'll call this jQuery example.html, and I want to change that because the J is always in lowercase and the Q is always in uppercase. jQuery example. All right, all I did was copy that information in. I made no changes to it. Now, I may have to, because it puts these two things, I might have to put an HTTP in there. And I'm just going to put them in there rather than even checking. So let's see if this works. Just thinking about it. All right. Something in there that it doesn't like. Oh, it's http:// sorry. Colon. So let's try that again. And there you see it. You go, that doesn't look the same. I don't have the CSS set up for it, but notice when I click on each one of these, see what happens? So it works. Same way. All right. The only thing I don't have are the CSS files. So I don't have this, somewhere there, right here. And that should have also been an HTTP. That's probably why I didn't get that. So let's look at it one more time. Look familiar? Pretty much looks the same way as it does in the book. There's my example, my gleaned or copied example, and there's the one that's in the book. They look very similar because they're virtually identical to one another. All right, as we finish up this chapter then, you work with CSS or cascading style sheet selectors You work with those when you are working with jQuery. All right. There's a toggle method, it's kind of cool. It allows you to show things or not show things. Notice here's an example, and maybe you've seen this on websites where they'll show you some text and then there'll be like a more. And if you click more, it'll show you more. You could take an article and maybe just show the first paragraph, for example. You can fairly quickly set up image galleries in jQuery. jQuery's got tons of plugins. All right. And that's it for the chapter. As it says, it introduced you to JavaScript and jQuery, which is a JavaScript library. The only other thing I want to tell you is it may seem like we're giving just lip service to jQuery. You're not seeing very much. If you're a student in the program, the follow-up class to the 152-119 Learning to Program Using JavaScript class, the follow-up class to that is 152-167, which is offered in spring, and it's entitled Ajax and JavaScript Website Development. And that pretty much historically has been a jQuery class. And that's really all I had.